Hey, what's going on? This is Sports Truth, and I'm your favorite host in the entire world, Jordan Harris. So today was the second practice for spring practice for the Miami Hurricanes. At the end of that practice, they did a quick little press conference for Shannon Dawson, the offensive coordinator. So he said a few things in this that were pretty eye-opening, but there was one comment that made me say, like, whoa, like maybe he's pretty serious. Like maybe he's hearing some folks around the country that's complaining about some of the decisions that he's made. And we'll talk about what that statement was towards the end of the video. So let's jump right into it. I want to go over some of the questions he was asked, go over some of the comments that he made with those questions. And then, like I said, I want to talk about what the most eye opening comment was to me towards the end. So the first question that he got was, or I guess I should say one of the first eye-opening questions that he got was about the year-to-year growth and what his expectations were this year, not just for the Miami Hurricanes in general, but mainly like about his offense. So his answer to that was about how big year three typically is for programs. And he was saying since this is Cristobal's, third year coming in with the seat, third full year, he was expecting a really big growth pattern this year. He was talking about how you often see players struggling the first year because they're trying to learn processes, struggling the second year because they're just now starting to get familiar with those processes and those game plans and the reasons why they do things. And he said in year three, typically the players are starting to understand what the coaches are wanting. So with this being the third year, he expects major growth. I thought that was pretty important. And he talked about where he came from, where he was before he was coaching for the Hurricanes. He talked about how they had such a huge growth in year three, and he was expecting the same thing here. Makes sense to me. I don't really think there's much to add to that. It just makes all the sense in the world. I don't think it's much nuance in that. I think that's just a straightforward conversation. Makes sense. Okay. Next question he talked about was the young receivers. As you all know, this is one of the best wide receiver classes we've ever had coming to Miami. And I'm sure a whole lot of you have heard that these receivers that's coming in this year are mostly really fast. Not just straight line fast, but also quick, shifty. And that was one of the things that he said. He was like, these kids can run. Talking about those new freshmen that's coming in. He talked about how the skill set on these youngsters is really impressive. And then he also said they are really impressive as far as their skill set, but it's like they're really young and they're new. So they're trying to learn everything. They're trying to learn what it's like to go from being a superstar in high school and mainly being able to outshine your competition just based on your pure God-given abilities. And now you've got to get into the lab and start doing all kind of training, start doing different drills that you've never even done before. So he talked about that. I thought that was some pretty cool insight. Then he talked about Restrepo. Someone asked about Restrepo because he apparently had a real cool catch during Wednesday's practice. Talked about Restrepo, and he said the biggest compliment I can ever give a player, he said, I will give that to Restrepo. And he said that compliment is that he's the same player every single day. And then he talked about how hard Restrepo plays every single down. I thought that was pretty eye-opening too. Then he mentioned how Restrepo is such a great example for the young kids that's coming up, getting better. And then he also made a comment that made me chuckle a little bit. He was like, older players tend to play better. He was like, that's just a rule of thumb. Older kids play better. Simple, straightforward, makes sense. So my comments and thoughts about this whole Restrepo section. If you remember, I actually did a video where I ranked every Miami Hurricane from its existence. I just ranked my favorite Miami Hurricanes all the way back up until now. And a lot of people were surprised at how high I had Xavier Restrepo rated. But he quickly became one of my favorite Hurricanes of all time. Just based on exactly what Shannon Dawson said. He is the same player every game. Same guy. You look at some players like Jacoby George, sometimes you're like, he didn't do that last game. Or you'll watch him this game, you say, what the hell is he doing? Or Tyler Van Dyke, for instance. We watch him light up the board against Texas A&M. Then he comes out later in the year, and you're like, what is this fool doing? Who is this dude wearing number 9? So you never did have that issue with number 7 out there. Restrepo is the same player every time. He also plays much bigger than his body is. He is a big-time player, one of my favorites of all time. They asked him about the quarterback room, and he mentioned how talented the quarterback room is. He stopped for a little bit. He was like, that is a really talented room. And when you think about it from top to bottom, it really is extremely talented, which is crazy because just a few months ago, if you were to ask me what the talent looked like in the quarterback room, I would say, man, we at like a C minus on as far as the talent goes in the quarterback room. But right now we've got a freshman that comes in he looks really good. We've got sophomores who look really good. You got Ja'Cory Brown, who played really well last bowl game. And then you got Reese Poffenbarger, who apparently has been playing pretty well in practice. And then, obviously, Cam Ward, biggest prize in the whole offseason. So the QB room, he talked about how impressively talented it is. And then he spoke about how it's the coach's job to make every room uncomfortable. So if you compare that to last year, I don't think the quarterback room was uncomfortable at all. I don't think the year before it was uncomfortable at all. I think Tyler Van Dyke knew it was his job from day one. I think that he knew he could make mistakes left and right and he still wouldn't be benched until he obviously was benched, which was crazy. But he just seemed like he was playing with such a level of comfort that it almost became a disregard of being such an important position, if that makes sense. So he talked about how it's the coach's job to make the rooms uncomfortable. And he was saying since the room is so talented, every quarterback in that room should feel a little bit uncomfortable enough to work hard to keep the job that they've earned. That made a lot of sense to me. I thought that was pretty cool. Some really good insight. Of course, he was asked about Cam Ward. He was asked what his expectations were and some of the conversations that he's had with Cam Ward so far. And he talked about, you know how a lot of people have talked about Cam Ward's fumbling issue, how many fumbles he had last year. I think he had like 17 fumbles last year, if I remember correctly, which is a lot. So he didn't directly talk about his fumbling, but he definitely mentioned it indirectly. So he talked about how it's important to scramble, but to scramble with his eyes down the field. I talk about quarterbacks who get super shook whenever they feel pressure around them, and instead of their eyes going down the field, their eyes go down onto the defensive lineman that's coming towards them. So he talked about the importance of Cam Ward scrambling, not running straight ahead, but scrambling left and right to keep the play alive, to throw the ball down the field to his playmakers. And he also mentioned that there's going to be about 10 plays every game if you throw the ball 40 times. He said about 10 of those plays, you're not going to have anybody open. And of those 10 plays, a lot of times the quarterback is trying to do too much and he causes a big dramatic turnover that can lose the game for you. I think that was his way of indirectly talking about how many times he fumbled last year. So he's saying, like, don't be a superhero. Scramble left to right, look down the field, throw the ball. But whenever you need to, throw the ball away, live to play another down. So that was some good insight as well. He compared the offense to the previous year. So they wanted him to compare some of the things that they've improved on last year compared to the year before. And then he also mentioned some of the things that they got worse in last year compared to the year before. So the two things that he said they actually got worse in are the things that I want to focus on here. He talked about turnovers. So his phrase was the turnovers were glaring. So he kept saying, like, you could just watch the game. Any game that we lost, he'll say, you could look and see one or two turnovers and say, that probably lost the game for us. That not only killed the momentum, but it took points off the board. And if you lose by 3 points and you turn the ball over twice in the red zone, I mean, there's the game right there, right? So he talked about how turnovers were glaring, But then he also talked about how red zone offense was something that got worse last year compared to the year before. Um, I didn't really, I can't say I didn't notice that because hell, I watched every game and I was ready to throw my remote at the TV so many different times because we kept turning the ball over in the red zone. And we had such a good kicker, it almost felt like we had a guaranteed 3 points if you just don't turn the ball over. So he mentioned how we turned the ball over 7 times in the red zone. And then he said there were a few times where we turned the ball over inside the 25-yard line. Obviously, that doesn't count as the red zone. But he said if you want to include those, it was more like 10 turnovers in the red zone or near the red zone. So he said those were the two things that they got worse in was turnovers and also red zone offense. All right, so the comment that made me say, okay, I cannot believe he just, I shouldn't say I can't believe he just said it, but I was so glad he said it. They asked him about the talent in the tight end room. Excuse me. And he said, there's a lot of competition in that tight end room. And he went down every tight end that was on the roster. He was like, he's really talented. He's young, but he's extremely talented. He played really well as a freshman last year, but he is really talented. He's going to show something this year. He's going to show something this year. He kept talking about how all these tight ends should be able to produce in one way or the other. And then he said, and I actually put a quote. So he talked about how good the tight end room was, and then he said, maybe y'all won't be asking me this year if I'll get the ball to the tight ends. When he said that, I said, thank you, Lord. He obviously has heard all of us complaining about him not getting the tight ends involved. I mean, as far as I'm concerned, it's tight end you. We've had a good tight end every year, even the down years. Like David Njoku came in, played outstanding, and got on out of here and went right to the NFL. Jimmy Graham came in during some down years, played extremely well, went to the NFL. We've had excellent tight ends as far as I can remember. For whatever reason last year, the tight ends did not get looks. I don't know what was going on. So for him to actually say, maybe y'all won't be asking me this year if I'll get the ball to the tight ends, maybe he finally, I don't know, like maybe he just sat down and looked at all this stuff all offseason so far. And he said, maybe something that we missing is getting these big, strong, athletic tight ends involved in the game. Maybe that happened. Maybe he was crazy enough to look up some YouTube videos and he saw people complaining about us not getting tight ends involved. Or maybe it was just the people from the local press continuously asking him, when do you plan on getting tight end X involved? When do you plan on getting tight end Y involved? Like maybe he just got tired of hearing those questions over and over. I don't know what it is, but the fact that he said that made me extremely happy. Extremely happy. Music to my ears, as I typically say. So, what you think, man? Please let me know in the comment section what your thoughts are. Are you excited about him potentially using these tight ends this year? Do you think that he actually will use the tight ends this year, or do you think he's just talking because he knows that people complain about it all the time? Also, I want to know, who is your favorite offensive player? Let me know who your favorite offensive player is outside of Cam Ward. We have not seen him play yet. So we do know quite a few players that's on this team. Jacoby George, Xavier Restrepo. We know plenty of players that's returning to the Hurricanes this year. So let me know who your favorite player is on the offensive side of the ball. And then some other time, probably on Friday, we'll talk about favorite player on the defensive side of the ball. Okay? Please do like the video. Subscribe to the channel. I appreciate the view. You could be anywhere in the world, but you're here with me, and I truly appreciate that. So take care. God bless. Peace.